join us today. Here we go. All right. So what I would love to hear, for those of you who are just joining us, if you want to pop specific questions or like a specific takeaway you're really hoping for from today, if there's anything in general that you're like, I really want you to touch on this. So the theme for today is all about kickstarting, which is like kind of getting us started on our program creation journey. But of course, with all of my course cafes, no questions are off the table. So if there's something specific that you want to dive into, you want to get feedback on, we can absolutely do that. So what I would love to do is maybe just take the first like 8 or so minutes just to answer any questions in particular that are coming up right away. And then I can kind of share some stuff around kickstarting and kind of getting started. And then we can kind of go back to some more general questions. So because we have such a nice small group, we can definitely take advantage of, like, you can, if you don't want to talk, you don't want to have your video on, that's totally fine. You can post in the chat for sure. But because we have a small group, we can actually take advantage of like coming on video and talking back and forth and just having that nice, like intimate experience, which is so fun. So I would love to just start probably with Kelly, because you're the first one to pop a question in the chat. I'd love to hear about kind of your question around positioning and kind of the language describing your course.
Yes, and I apologize for my voice. I'm getting over a sinus infection. That's why I'm bright red like a tomato. I'm trying to break this fever here. Anyway, so I have a similar background niche as you, Emily, in that I'm a recovering academic turned instructional designer turned course creator, teacherpreneur. And so my first course is about how to plan one's course.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also a recovering perfectionist, although I'm far less in the journey of perfectionism than I want to be of recovering from it. Anyway, so I overthink my language and overcomplicate, for example, like my headline, my sales page, copy, all that stuff. And so my general idea is to kind of position it as something like from course concept to course complete,
mm-hmm.
how to plan your digital course or group program or something along those lines. But I guess I just need feedback in the sense that, is it better to go like for the monetization language angle, like how to monetize your expertise, how to scale your coaching program? Should I just focus on sort of the general transformation?
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of stuck because I do, I'm a solopreneur. And so I just need feedback.
Yeah, for sure. So whenever it comes to like naming things or positioning things, or pretty much anytime we have to use words, which can be really challenging unless you're one of those people who's like gifted at like copywriting. When in doubt, I always like to go back to my people and go, whether I have testimonials or whether I have feedback forms or like I've surveyed my audience, I like to see like what language are they using and what do they focus on most. And so for your people, what I would love to know is like when they're talking to you and they're like, Kelly, please help me. Like, I know I have this knowledge and I just want to monetize it. Or are they saying like, oh, I have this thing, but I just don't know how to finish it. Like, where are they putting the emphasis? Because, even for instance, like Dustin also is teaching people how to create courses and I teach people how to create courses, but we all kind of serve our audiences in different ways. And our people are going to be attracted to us for different things. And so I think instead of worrying about like, how like trying to pick it out of the ether in terms of what people are looking for, I would turn back to what your people specifically are asking for, and then see if you can come up with positioning language that essentially uses their language.
Yes, thank you. I guess I needed confirmation on that because, I hear so many people, and Emily, Dustin, I'm sure y'all probably can attest to this, I just want to finish it, or I have this great idea, but I don't know how to execute it or what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, like I said, just being such a want to be perfect, far from it. I try to kind of succinctly want to use market language or business ease instead of using their language.
Yeah.
So, okay. Thank you.
Permission granted. Use their language because that's what's going to resonate the most.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
That's a great question. So I'd love to hear, if anyone else has any kind of burning questions that like, yes, can we please start with this before we get into the kind of kickstart element of it all? Feel free. You can use like the raise hand feature on Zoom, or you can pop it in the chat, whichever you prefer. Okay, I want to make sure I don't miss anyone with a raised hand here. That's good. All right. Okay. Yeah, Robin, you want to run an idea? Let's hear it.
Yes. Okay. So I don't even know where to start on this. So my signature brand building framework, the brand capsule, that's what I run through my one-on-one clients with. Way back in the day when we met, you saw the first iteration of my online course, which was kind of a beginner version of that. But I wanted to kind of simplify things and not have so many different programs and names and concepts. So I just turned the brand capsule into an online course. I filmed it, everything's done. It's basically just an upgraded version of what I had before. But in really sitting with that, I realized people will have the most success with it, doing it in some kind of connection with me and even with others. Mm-hmm. So rather than selling it just like the whole program on its own, I'm thinking of bringing that into like a rolling enrollment group program style. So like the course material will be there in their portal, and then we'll have the community with, let's say, bi-weekly, 90-minute Q&As, hot seats, whatever. And then a few one-on-ones, I'm thinking like 3 or 4 kind of peppered at key milestones throughout. So I'm thinking of doing that, like just keeping the doors always open and having people apply to come be a part of that. Because I feel like because it's a group, I don't want a bad apple in there. Not that I think that would happen, but I don't know if that's a fear thing or like a legit concern. But having it application and then having it always open, and having the price point be higher, obviously, than a standard just DIY course, because this is more of the done with you. So that's kind of the model that I'm thinking. But I get in the problem of building things and creating things because I think it's a great idea and not like necessarily testing it. So I think I need to do a beta test before I like fully bring this to the world and, market it in the way that I kind of envision. But yeah, I wanted to get your insight on that kind of model. Like if you've seen that work, if you have any suggestions, if you think I should have like launches rather than just always kind of keeping the doors open. Yeah. And then the kind of the journey or the point of all of it, I want to call it soul brand. So like, you're not just building a brand, you're building a soul brand. So here's how we do the self-discovery, bring that into strategic self-expression. And by the end of this, it's not about logos and colors necessarily. It's about like, how do you take all of you and express that in the context of your brand and your business in a way that's super aligned with who you are, with your soul. Mm-hmm. So that's my concept. Yeah. I'd love your input.
Oh my goodness. I'm obsessed. I love this. So I definitely have a soft spot for rolling admission group programs because that's what the incubator is. So that's my group program, which is, I ran the first one ever as a cohort to kind of like test things out and like iron out any kinks and like that type of thing and see how people responded. And what I realized is, especially on journeys where people need to go at their own pace. And I think, on something like a soul brand where like they're going to need time in certain areas that might not be the same for everyone. And that's what I discovered with, this current round of the incubator is, everyone kind of started going at their own pace. And I was like, okay, well, how can I honor this in an evergreen container? Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of power in letting people kind of come in when they need to come in and like go at their own pace. And, how I'm structuring mine is it's a 4-month commitment. And then after that, it rolls month to month.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
So I'm thinking something like that for you. The biggest way to set people up for success in the kind of evergreen hybrid style of programs is to give a lot of structure as to their action plan, because when they don't have the structure of the cohort that's kind of telling them like week 1 do this, week 2 we're doing this, week 3 we're doing this, that type of thing, having some sort of plan that's like, okay, here's in general how I recommend you use your time. So like, for instance, in my program, I literally say like, there's a quiz where they choose a pathway, and then the pathway gives them like, here's your custom action plan based on like your energetic needs, essentially. Like, are you the type of person who wants to push through the whole thing? Do you need more space? That type of thing. So I could see that. I definitely think the model can be really successful if you give them enough structure.
Okay. I like that. I like that you've proven the model. Do you have yours as application, or do you just sell it straight off a landing page?
Yeah, right now I'm having it open. And so far I've been really lucky in the fact that everyone in my audience is super awesome. So I've been getting some really, really wonderful souls in there. I definitely have seen it go both ways. I think it depends also on like the price point. And if there's certain things where if people aren't at a certain point, it's going to be a detriment to the cohort. So for instance, I see this in like business style programs where like, you know, what an entrepreneur who hasn't hit 6 figures yet versus someone who's mid 6 versus someone who's 7 figures, they're going to need very different things out of the people in that cohort. So that's where the application almost kind of protects the energy of everyone there versus if you're like, you know what, there's a benefit to having a range. And if someone comes in at either different points in their business or different niches or something like that, it's not going to impact the group, then you might mostly need an application. Okay, that's good to know. Do you see if there's like a max? I mean, this is a little bit more of a marketing question. Is there a max in terms of price point for enrolling via a sales page? Like, no, like honestly, I think I've seen people kind of, I used to think there was a max, and then I've just seen people blow it out of the water. I've seen people enroll like $25,000 programs just from a sales page. I've seen people roll like, you know, $350,000 programs from a sales page. So I think really it depends on your audience and how you position it. Okay, cool. Okay. Awesome. I think that was my question for now. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Thanks. Okay. So I want to, Kim has a question around learning styles. And then what I would love people to do kind of using the reaction feature. If you're feeling like you're loving just having some open Q&A, I'd love for you to put like a little like heart on your screen. And if you're feeling you're like, I would love to kind of get into the Kickstart content, I'd love for you to put the little like celebration emoji on your screen. So you can kind of vote here and we'll see which approach we take. And then while you're voting, Kim, you can let me know your question on learning styles.
Hi, yeah, I think it might just be a quick one. So I'm a web designer, so I want to create a course to show people how to create a website. So a lot of it is going to be very instructional, as in you click what I click, you know, that kind of thing. And obviously there's a lot of talk about learning styles in the online space at the moment and catering for, you know, different entry points and things like that. But I kind of feel like because my course isn't, I'm not teaching a concept, I'm teaching you, I want you to do this. Where does learning styles really come into that at all?
Such a good question. So this is a huge topic. I'll try to keep it short. But the long and short of it is in the instructional design world, so in the learning design world, learning styles as a concept have actually been widely debunked in the sense that there's not a lot of theory showing that people, if they only can learn through audio or they can only learn through video or something like that. So there's been a lot of like, oh, well, like I'm a kinesthetic learner or something like that. But actually what the theory supports is that the best way to learn is for people to put things into practice and to have a multimedia approach. So for your style of program, I think it's where we want to provide multiple ways of learning from an accessibility standpoint. So having a video, but having it either with captions or having a transcript available or that type of thing. And then from the application or the implementation standpoint, just making sure that you're never going too long before they're taking action. And that's really how you'll support people the most, in the sense of like, okay, click here, now you click here, now you do this, and showing what the outcome can be, like keeping like a nice tight outcome, like, okay, this tutorial specifically for setting up your navigation bar, something like that. Does that make sense?
Brilliant. Yes, thank you very much.
Awesome. Great. Okay, so I could see from the votes, everyone's like, all right, let's talk about the Kickstart stuff. Like, let's do this, what I came here for. So I'm so excited. We've got such a good group of people on. So what I want to do with talking about the Kickstart is, I know that all of you are here because you have this like vision for this program that you want to create. And you have this idea and you're like, I want to do this. But when it comes to starting, it can feel a little bit like, okay, but where do I start? Like, I have so many questions. Like, do I pick my platform first? Do I figure out tech? Like, how do I market it? How do I position it? All of these things. And so I want to just kind of lead you through the starting steps that I do with all my clients, all my students, pretty much anyone who comes into my world, that I find can really help anchor us when we are talking about creating our program. So I'm looking down because I've got my notes because I want to make sure I don't miss anything. And if at any point you have questions, feel free, you can pop them in the chat or you can use the raise hand feature. Like I said, this is our time, so we can be really interactive here. But where I like to start, where I recommend we start, is really by anchoring into our vision for this program. Because I find the further into the course creation journey we get, the program creation journey, and I'm going to use course and program interchangeably. I know some of you are doing group programs, some of you are doing course, but I'm just kind of, what we're talking about applies to all different types of learning experiences. But what I find is when the further we get into the journey, the more off track from our original intention we can get, because that tends to be when we start to get bombarded with all the shoulds of it all. Or like, I should record videos with slides. I should launch it this way. I should have this. I have to do this because that's what everyone does. And so by taking the time to kind of anchor into our vision, it gives us this like place of groundedness to come back to. And so what I like to do when we're kind of starting by tuning into our vision for our program is I like to make a hell yes and a hell no list. This is one of the first things I recommend that you do to remind yourself of like what it is that you want this program to do for you. Because we all have different intentions behind our program. Sometimes it's we want to make what we do one-to-one more accessible. Sometimes it's that we want to do less one-to-one and we want to be able to scale. Sometimes it's that we want to complement things or add in a new offer. We all have different intentionalities. But then also because we all have really big hearts, often we're like, oh, but I could add this and I could do this. And it'd be really nice if I did live calls and this, that, or the other. And before we know it, we've designed this like mammoth of an online program that maybe wasn't our original intention. So what I'd love for you to do is on your hell yes or your hell no list, I want you to think about things that feel like a lean in or a lean out around your program. For instance, like, hell yes, I want to have live calls. Like, I love my people. Like, I definitely want to have live calls. Or like, hell no. Like, the whole purpose of this program is to like be scalable and not have live elements. We're thinking about, do you want to have a community that you're managing? Do you want to have, any sort of interaction with your people, or do you want it to be purely self-study? Do you want to have videos, or do you want to find a different way of teaching what you're teaching? Why don't you just start thinking about things that feel like, if I could wave a magic wand and like bring this dream program to life, like what would that look like? Because what I always say is that anything is possible if we're intentional about it. We can find a way around pretty much any of the shoulds of an online program if we're really creative. So if we tune into what feels like a yes, I absolutely want to do this, or no, I don't, then that can kind of give us some information around how we need to structure things, how we need to make things work. And the reason that I start here, and this is something I've kind of like learned over the years of business, is when I first started teaching people in the online space how to create courses, I always said, put the learner first. The learner should be at the heart of everything that you do. And this is absolutely true. And at the end of the day, you need to put yourself first so that you're not building a course that you're going to be resentful about, that you're going to feel icky about selling because you're going to be secretly being like, oh, this means more people in my Facebook group and I don't want them there. Or like, oh yeah, like, this course was so great, but the actual like delivery of it is like killing my soul. Or I didn't price it right and now I feel resentful. We really want to make sure that we're putting our needs, our schedule, our energy first. And then we can design a program that still meets the learner and delivers the experience that we really want. And I see Destin's like, yeah, I learned this lesson the hard way too. We often do. And this comes when we're all like really compassionate people. So starting with that hell yes and hell no list. And I'd love for you to share in the comments, like some things that are coming up for you around like hell yeses or hell nos. If there's anything on there that feels like surprising or anything that you're like, thank you for giving me permission to put this on my no list, because you always have full permission. We can, and then when we get into some Q&A, we can talk about how to come up with ways around it. If there's something on your no list that you're like, I don't want to do this, but I feel like I have to. So once you kind of have like settled into those like hell yeses and hell nos, this can kind of start to give you ideas around like the structure of your program in the sense of, are there going to be live elements? Are there going to be a community? Is it kind of starting to tell you that, you know, if you don't want to have any live elements, maybe it's going to be self-study? Is it going to tell you that it's going to be a group program? It's going to start kind of giving you ideas around the essence of this program. And it's okay if things aren't like super solid yet. That's totally fine. So I see that Erica says like, hell yes, hands off, self-serve. Jennifer says, hell no to one-on-one of any kind. And then Robin says, hell yes to live elements, which was originally a hell no for me. So I love, we can already see in the comments that like, it's so different for everyone. And like, that's what's awesome is like, there's not, one of the things that is kind of like a mantra for me for this year is like not making myself wrong. So like not making yourself wrong for like claiming the things that you want or you don't want in your experience. Kim says, hell no to community. Yes, 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 yes. So once we're kind of getting these ideas of things, starting to figure out our hell yeses and hell nos, this is where then we can start to think about, okay, I've got this framing of our program. So now we want to start tuning into like, what is the journey that I want to take my people on? What is the transformation I want to provide for this course? I'm getting a sense of like how I'm going to frame it. And sometimes our hell yeses and nos actually start to shift how we frame this transformation, because we might realize, you know what, if it's a hell no for one-to-one, it's a hell no for live, this transformation that I originally was thinking of for my program might need to come down a little bit. Like I might not be able to sustain that transformation self-serve, or it might need to grow because we're thinking, oh, I can actually take them on a longer journey. So this is where we can really start thinking about, in general, what is the experience I want to craft for my people? Like, how do I want them to feel in this program? What transformation do I want to ignite for them? And these questions can be really high level at this point. I'm going to talk to you more about journey mapping in a little bit, which is where we get really specific on our transformation. But right now, we're just kind of tuning into the energy of the experience. So thinking about like, again, the most ideal experience that we could have. So thinking about like, what would an amazing transformation be like for them? And how do I want them to feel along this journey? How do I want to feel as part of this journey? So I love what Dustin said around like, hell no to jam-packed weeks in a fast-paced course. So for some people, it's like, I want spaciousness and I want the experience to feel expansive and people can go at their own pace. And then other people, if they're more quick starts, might be like, I want that fast pace. Like I want things to be like an accelerator. So again, it's like not making yourself wrong for the experience that you're wanting to cultivate. And Jennifer, I think I need these lists for my business overall. It's so true. It's a good like anchoring. So kind of starting to tune into this, like this transformation that you're feeling like you want to bring to life for your people. And if it's feeling like you want to share, I'd love to see it in the comments, kind of like, this is the experience I want to cultivate for my people. This is kind of, I'm starting to get an idea of this transformation that I want to bring them on. Kind of starting to think about that. If you want to share, if you don't, that's also okay. So this is where we just really want to kind of anchor into our original intention for the program. So before I go any further, I would just love to see what questions you have for me over kind of what we've chatted about so far, if any. And you're welcome to put those questions in the comments if you don't want to come off camera, or if you do, you can just use a little like raise hand feature and I'll call on you. Yeah, Erica.
Yeah, so I am, and I'm so pumped to get started with that tomorrow. But I am building a course on job searching in the tech industry. And job searching in the tech industry is one of these things that like makes people's stomach turn into knots. I've had multiple people be like, job searching makes me want to like go clean my house and scrub the floors and do anything except write my resume. Like there's like a very visceral response. And so I want to try to make my program easy, like accessible and easy in some way. And I don't know if like, I don't think fun is probably going to come into it, but I would like it to not be torturous. And I'm just trying to think about like, how do I add those elements into a program that is self-serve? Because I also want things easier for me because I do a lot of one-on-one today.
Oh, I love that. And I think, like you've already won like half the battle just by having that awareness of like the resistance that people are feeling when they come into things. And this is so great because this like literally leads me right into the next step that we're going to do together. So what I'm going to do is just going to use you as an example, if that's okay, while we kind of talk about our next step in the process. Does that work?
Sure.
Yeah, awesome. So what we do is kind of like once we have this idea for this vision of our program, we're kind of feeling into things. This is where the very first step that I recommend everyone does when they're creating a program is what I call journey mapping, which is where we really dive into essentially the beginning point of our program and the end point of our program. And we get really, really crystal clear on what those two things are, because not only does this help us tune in to see if like, is the scope of this program sustainable for me? Like, have I promised too much, or have I promised too little? Is it feeling good? But it also makes sure that we can meet our people exactly where they are and then get crystal clear on where we're taking them as part of the transformation. And so using kind of Erica as an example, we're going to talk about the beginning of our people's journey. So dialing into kind of where they are right now. We want to get clear on kind of what's going on in their life, what skills do they have or not have, how are they feeling, what are they thinking, getting really, really painting it as clear of a picture as we can. And I'll lead you through some more questions around this in a minute. But one of the things I want to speak to with what Erica was sharing was that there's this sense of like resistance and like the extreme, I call it productinating, like where you go do something productive, but like you're just avoiding what you should be doing. Like, oh, I can't possibly work when my desk is this messy. So if we know that at the beginning of the journey, our people are kind of feeling that way, this gives us a really excellent insight into where our program needs to start, which is probably with some gentle but slightly tough love around just like saying to them like, hey, like, I know this process is like a little bit scary or that it feels a bit uncomfortable. And here's how I am going to support you through this process. So that's where, on a practical standpoint, we can do things like making the actual learning experience as easy as possible through like short bite-sized videos, really simple action steps, giving them a ton of tools and resources so that it's kind of like almost impossible to not take action, because it's like, I just need you to go write this letter using this template. Please just go do it. But also from the kind of like the energy that you embody around saying like, okay, I can see you, I can understand where you're feeling or like how you're feeling and where you are. And so I'm honoring what you're feeling. And I'm also telling you like, this is what needs to happen. So it's kind of letting them know, like at certain points in this journey, it's going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. And here's how I'm going to support you through it. So kind of almost giving them a preview of what's coming. Do you feel like that answered your question, Erica?
Yeah, super helpful.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, amazing. So getting more specific into the beginning of our journey. And the reason I like to start at the beginning and not necessarily at the end, like we often do in learning design, is because when we get really clear on the beginning of our journey, it also kind of, we get to double dip. It helps us with our program and it helps us with our marketing. So it gives us a lot of information around the type of content we need to be sharing, how we need to be positioning our course, things we need to be addressing, which are all things that we can start doing while we're building our course in the back end. So creating a program is a ton of like creation energy, as like silly as that sounds, because not only are we're designing the program, but then we're like building the videos, we're building the workbooks, we're like writing the emails for the course. But then on top of that, we have all the launch creation energy as well. We have to like create our pre-launch campaign and our launch events and like all of these different things, which I'm having a launch cafe. So we're going to dive into like specifics around that in the launch cafe, which is same time on Monday next week. So the more that we can kind of work smarter and not harder and kind of double dip with the work that we're doing, like the better. And so what I want you to do is thinking about your people. And this process works super well if you have a specific person in mind. So like whether it's a client that you've worked with or like someone in your audience that you've engaged with a lot. In the same way that when we're doing our marketing, we want to speak to like one specific person. This works really well if we kind of speak to one ideal learner. And then throughout the learning design process, we can do what's called universal designs for learning, which is where we make it as accessible for as many different people as possible. But in the beginning, we want to get really clear on one specific person so we can almost create like a psychographic of who our person is so that we can get a sense of what does their life look like right now? So if they're a business owner, what's going on in their business, what's working well, what's not working well, how are they feeling? What stories are they telling themselves? What gaps are there between their skills and their knowledge? The more we can get clear on this, the more we can see not only where does our program need to start, but also if there are any major things that need to be addressed in our marketing. So for instance, if I don't know why I always end up using fitness and diet culture as an example in these, but if our person is okay, I really just want to lose weight, that's what they're focusing on. And they think they just need to cut out carbs and do cardio every single freaking day. And we're over here offering a 6-month group coaching program that's you're going to, eat balanced and we're going to do this. And slow and steady wins the race. There's going to be a huge gap between what they're looking for as a solution and what we're providing as a solution in our program. And so we know then if there's this gap between what our people think they need versus what we know they need, this is something that we can start to close in our pre-launch campaign. So that's all of the content, all the posts, all the things that we're sharing before we get into the official cart open, yay, buy my program period of things. So I want you to ask yourself, what gaps do your people have? Is there a skill gap where maybe they, oh, Karen, yes, there will be a recording for sure. I'll send that out later today. So is there a skill gap where, for instance, I'm thinking for you, Kim, okay, I'm teaching people some web design stuff, but if they don't know this specific skill, they're not going to be successful in my program. So is that something I need to teach them? Is there a knowledge gap? For instance, for my people, if they don't have a really deep understanding of their audience, then it's going to be really hard to be successful in my framework. I'm going to need to support them on that more. Is there an awareness gap of what they think the solution is, they're aware of what the real problem is in their life versus what's actually going on? So the more we can kind of tune into what those gaps are, the more we can get a sense of not only where does our program need to begin, but also what do we need to address in our marketing? And possibly one of the biggest things that we need to think about is what stories or myths or misconceptions is going on for our people that maybe we need to address. Because if we're, for instance, giving them this program and they're going, it's going to be so hard, I can't do it, I just want to clean my office or something like that, then maybe we need to reframe that. Or if they're thinking who am I to be teaching this program? I'm not an expert, then maybe the imposter syndrome needs to be addressed. So thinking about what sort of gaps could be coming up for people. So I'd love to know, if some gaps are already coming up that you want to share, feel free to pop them in the chat. Or if you have questions about what we've talked about so far, feel free to raise your hand and I'm happy to dive deeper into anything we've talked about.
Okay. Can I ask one?
Yeah, go for it.
So I know that one of the things I really would like to do is get working with people who have established courses really to take them up there. But it definitely feels like the audience that's coming in are I'm just trying to sell it. I'm just trying to get my feet under me with my first one. How do I build it? So that feels like a big gap, or at least in my messaging. Do you have any advice for kind of either, I know I could kind of do program build, the program ladder. Maybe that's just what I need to do, but advice for that gap?
Yeah, for sure. So this part of this is kind of making a decision around who do you want to be serving? Do you want to be serving both audiences? At which point probably doing a bit of almost I have a fly buzzing around me. That's why I'm waving my hands. A bit of marketing cycling where okay, this your Atomic Lessons challenge that you're doing right now. It's okay, this is specifically for these people. And even saying things this is for you if, or this type of thing, or sharing that almost that empathy content of does this sound like you? Is this something that you're doing? Versus making a decision okay, do I only want to serve these kind of beginner people? I hate using the word beginner, but you know what I mean? They're early on in their journey versus these people who are established. If those are the people that you want to serve, then I think that's where your content that you're sharing needs to pivot, because there can be a tendency often, which is when we're doing our marketing, is to start at step 0 with how-to content. I'm going to start at the beginning and I'm going to share how to get started and how to do this. But if we realize like, okay, so for the people who need to take their program to the next level, what's their awareness of that like next levelage, in the sense of like, are they like, okay, I know this program could be better, but I don't even know how to do that? Is it that they're like, oh, my program's fine, but like, because this is just what a program is. Like, we're so used to a really low standard with courses that like sometimes it's like people aren't even thinking about that. So maybe then your content needs to be around, like, this is why you want to take your course to the next level, or here's signs that your course isn't good, or like, here's how to audit your course, and here's how to like get feedback from your people. Really making sure that like everything you're doing from the tactical standpoint of like how to, and here's how to do this, but also that, like I said, that empathy content or that mindset content of like addressing what blocks they may have. Let's see, you post something, yeah, like the content that does the best. You're saying like the how-to content, and like for like the people at the early in the journey. Yeah. Sometimes it can be harder to find the people that are like at that level. And part of it is also a reminder of like, where do your people hang out? So this is something like I realized with like my clients is like, when I first started with my business, I was like, oh, I was like running a podcast, and I was doing the blog posts, and I was doing the lead magnets and all that stuff. And then I was like, oh yeah, people who are running like 6 and multi-6 and 7-figure businesses aren't signing up for a lead magnet. They're maybe not signing up for a free training. They might find me through Instagram, but for the most part, they're finding me through people that they know. And so that's where I put all of my effort on, like, networking and getting in the rooms where people were hanging out. So if those are the people that you want to work with, it's going, okay, how do they find me, and how do I find them? Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
You're welcome. I'm just going back through the comments to see. So Erica says like, so many gaps, like my resume is my issue. Jobs go off the market before they even get posted. So a lot of the times when we're looking at the gaps, like those are great examples. They're like a belief gap or like a misconception. And sometimes the content that's like it's a little bit snarky, but it does really well. It's like, your resume is not the issue, or like, maybe it's you, or like something where you're just kind of like calling it out, like finding a way to do it in like a way that feels like fun and loving and not shameful. But, I see this a lot. Like, I have a client who her whole academy is around helping people establish a strong brand foundation for their product-based business. And they always want ads. They're like, that's what I need. I need Facebook ads. And so she had to do a lot of like educational content around like, you don't need ads. Here's why it's not effective to focus on ads. So sometimes like tuning in on like, what are those blocks or those barriers that are going to stop people from even looking at you as a solution, and kind of starting to like reframe them is so great. And yeah, Robin, that's so true as well. People don't necessarily know that like brand means more than colors, than logos and fonts. So there's a lot of education around the fullness and the depth of what a brand is. And I think, Robin, like your people are so soulful. I think there's such an invitation there for that really like inspirational, soulful content of like almost speaking to that feeling or that calling that like I know they have, that you're like, okay, you've got this feeling, I'm going to put it into words, and like, here's what you're looking for. So, so many good things here. Lots of, yeah. Kim saying like, honestly, tell them they're no good with tech. It's interesting here because like a lot of these gaps coming up, we notice there's a lot of like, what are they thinking, or like, what are they telling themselves? And so a really great question specifically for your content and your marketing can be like, how do my people need to be thinking to be ready for my launch event? How do my people need to be thinking to be ready for my program? How do my people need to be thinking when they're at the beginning of my program and I want them to be able to take action? So those are so many great shares. Okay. So we've talked about kind of the beginning of the journey. So now it's time to talk about the end of the journey, which is our second part of journey mapping. So once we have kind of an idea of where our people are, this is now where we want to look at where do we want to take them. And this is an iterative process. This isn't like a one and done thing, because we end up playing a bit of like transformation ping pong. So what I want you to do is think about like, okay, with this vision I have, this intention I set at the beginning, how do I want to change people's lives? Like, where do I want to take them to? And what I find can be really helpful is to almost imagine like, if we know where they're starting and we're building a path for them, like paving stone by paving stone, how long do we want that path to be? Because sometimes what we end up doing is we end up feeling like we have to take them all the way to the end. We feel like, okay, my people are at step 1 or step 2, and I want to take them all the way to step 10. And sometimes what we actually only need to do is take them to step 3 or 4, depending on the style of program that we want to create, the amount of energy we want to put in, if it's self-study, those types of things. So I want you to ask yourself for the transformation, looking at where your people are starting, where do you want to take them to? Like, how do you want to change things for them? What skills will they have at the end of your program? What will they be able to do? How will their life be transformed? How will things be different for them? Are they feeling differently? Are they thinking differently? Do they have new skills and knowledge? So kind of tuning into what does that transformation look like? And in the beginning, let yourself dream big. Like, just be like, I'm going to write down all the things that I want to achieve for them. I want to, like, all the possibilities. And from there, and we can chat about this, that's where we can decide, like I said, the transformation ping pong of like looking at the end of the journey and the transformation we want to provide in the beginning, and deciding like, how big is that journey? And does it need to be broken up into smaller ones? Can it be one big long one? And again, there are no hard and fast rules. So there's lots of possibilities here. So kind of tune into, how do you want your people to feel? What do things look different for them? What skills and knowledge have they gained? Like, what gaps have been closed? Hearing about that. And so I would love to hear, what questions you have around this kind of determining the transformation of your program. If you want to share the transformation of your program, either in the chat, or you can like raise your hand and I can hear it. So let me know if you want to share or if you have any questions. Okay. Erica, do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. I'm like deep in this right now since we're going to start tomorrow. So, yes. So the job search journey, in my mind, is broken up into parts. It's like just starting, getting that resume put together, the targeting piece of what job should I even be targeting in the first place. So that's like step 1, then resume, actually get in the door, get an interview, then the interviewing piece, and then offer negotiation at the end. So I'm torn because there's lots of programs out there that are like soup to nuts from very beginning of the process of like, I want to look for a new job all the way to offer signed. But there's also people that I get along the way. And so the program that I'd like to build is just that very first part of like, get in the door, book an interview. But I'm also a little bit worried of like, is that too narrow? Will people be unsatisfied if they get an interview or they've invested in a program where it takes actually some effort to get the interview in the first place? And then they still have to go through the whole interview process. So my original idea was this more modularized program of like each of those little steps as its own self-serve course with upgrades to be able to do one-on-one stuff. But that's what I'm a little bit wrestling with. Like, is this enough? Is that one bite-sized thing enough to feel like people have had a transformation?
Such a great question. And what I love about this is I think a lot of it, what it comes down to is like the transparency in the marketing, because often when people feel like dissatisfied with something is when the sales page has promised the world and then the program doesn't deliver it. But if you're completely transparent and you share with them, like, this is where I'm taking you to, and this is why I've stopped it here. And I think this is where that intentionality piece really comes into play, is that if we can say a reason, like, I'm giving you this thing because like, this is what you need right now. And this is like, it's exactly what you need. And I'm going to lead you through it step by step. And I'm going to get you to this result. Like, that impact is going to be so huge for your people. And if you can share why you broke it that way, like it's one of those things that it's like, okay, are we just breaking it up that way because it's like, well, I just want to continually upsell you as part of a funnel? Then things can feel like a little bit like, but like, I know that's not the case for you. You're like, I want to make sure that I'm serving you with exactly what you need and when you need it. And when it comes from that place of service, then your people really respond to it. So I think, not worrying about the like, is it too small? Because it has that kind of right-sized feel. It's like, if we ever had a problem, like, I'm trying to think of something like, I don't know, like how to repair my toilet. And then you like go on YouTube and you find that exact video that's like, here's this one thing that you're struggling with. And you're like, where have you been all my life? This is great. that's how those small bite-sized kind of toolkit style courses tend to really resonate with people, because they tend to be more affordable and they tend to be exactly what they need in that moment. So people are like, yes, take my money. This is great.
Yeah. And I think that's how it works now, as like a one-on-one service. And then they do hopefully come back and want more. But okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes it can be really helpful too, to like illustrate the journey, like exactly like you said, like having that visual of like, here's this, here's this, here's this. And then that way they can identify like what they need and be able to pick exactly what they need. Because I think that, there gives a lot of power to it. I know that's how like I decided to break up my product suite, as well as also like, people who haven't designed their course yet need something very different from people who just need to build their materials, which is like in the course builder box, versus people who are like, I have my whole course, but like the idea of group calls stresses me out. So that's how I decided. I was like, well, I want to make sure that I'm serving very specific pain points for people so that they can take what they need and not feel like they're having to spend way more money on a course that they're not going to use all of. And you can always bundle your courses together too. You can always take small ones and bundle them together. It's a lot harder to take a big one and then like break it off or convince someone to buy a big course when they only need a piece of it. Great question. Robin, you have a follow-up question.
Yeah. I heard from one coach, one of the tactics that she uses is she has sort of her main bigger processes, her bigger transformational journeys, but then she takes kind of little micro topics within that and siphons those off into those like toolkit style, like one-off, very specific programs or workshops or masterclasses or whatever. So with that, like, how do you not cannibalize the main program, or should those little mini things be like totally different, like not necessarily related? Because in my mind, I'm like, that could be an easy way to kind of get people into the bigger group program, is like, maybe let's just do a one-off 1-hour masterclass about brand purpose, which is one of 12 steps in my main process. But like, is that a good kind of way to bring people into your world, catching them at a lower price point so that they can eventually come up here? Or is there that risk of cannibalizing your offers?
Yeah. Ooh, such a great question. So I think there's lots of different ways of like pulling little bite-sized pieces out of your ecosystem. So one is like, if you think about having this framework, like you said, there's 12 steps, and like pulling out one step, you definitely don't have to worry about things being cannibalized, because obviously there's like all these other steps that are missing. And I always like to say too, is I like to play the long game with my audience, in the sense, sometimes people can feel like, oh, well, if you satisfy them too much with your masterclass, then they're not going to want to buy your program. But like, my thing is like, I would rather you come to something free that I do and get like exactly what you need, and then come back to me like a year later. Like, that's totally fine. Then feel like, oh, if you're not buying right now, that's like not okay. So I think, just from a principle standpoint, delivering like huge amounts of value is like never a detriment to your business building. It might be a slower growth, but it's definitely there. So I think you very much could pull something out. The other way I've seen people pull things out is when you pull out the like the tools, like this is my swipe files and my templates, or like this is my like swipe files, templates, done for you processes, that type of thing. But the actual like how those templates get plugged into a larger system is in the signature course. And those are the ones that you can still charge for. And then it kind of works both ways, because it's like, you can buy just this thing, but if you buy the big program, then it's like, this thing's a bonus for it. So it's kind of, it feeds both ways in your pipeline. How does that feel?
Yeah, I really like that. I like that. The idea of pulling out the tools specifically rather than necessarily the teaching modules or concepts. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, amazing. Such great questions. Okay, so I want to talk about the third piece in journey mapping, because this is something that often gets missed. We feel like, okay, we know where our people are starting. We know where our people are ending. We're done. We're good. Just fill in the gaps. We're fine. But one of the pieces that gets missed is, what are the blocks our people are going to encounter along the way? So thinking about, I like to kind of divide these up into like external and internal blocks. So external blocks are things like demands on their time, like, are they working another job? Are they a parent? Do they have other things that are going to stop them from being able to actually engage with the course? Do they have, demands on their space where like they can only access their office like half an hour a day? Like thinking about those kind of external blocks that are going to come up for them. And then also thinking about the internal blocks that are going to come up for them. So these tend to be, I call them like thought gremlins. This is a term that my friend Leisha McDonough uses. So these are those really unfortunate gremlins that just kind of like live in your brain and just tell you like really unhelpful things. So things like, you know, it's not perfect yet, so you can't keep moving forward, or like, you know, I don't have time to focus on this, so I'll just come back when I can put more attention on it, or like, who am I to be doing this work? This is silly. Like all those like unfortunately unhelpful things that come up. And so we can't premeditate absolutely every experience that the humans going through our programs are going to have, because, you know, humans are very unique. But the more that we can try to catch the major ones that are going to come up, whether it's right at the beginning, kind of like we were saying, those things of like, oh, I should focus over here instead, or like, I just need to talk about this or that or the other, but also at specific journeys along the way. So if we know there's a specific module, like the example I often give is like for courses we see that are kind of like get your business started, and at some point you have to build a website. Websites are procrastination pits where people will just spiral on them for like months. You know, I think I took like 6 months to get my first website up. Like it took so long. And so if we know there's a certain spot, like a certain thing that's going to be a block for our people, how can we do everything in our power to like help them get over that block? Whether it is like kind of calling them out, like, don't stop here, like, just get this done, just move forward. Thanks, Sabine. Thanks for being here. You know, calling them out and just saying like, okay, I know you're going to want to spiral here, but like, for the love of God, please don't. Or giving them tools to be like, okay, all I need you to do is just like write your homepage using these Mad Libs and this template and just get it done. You know, and especially I find if you're working with like more kind of beginner style people, they really need the spoon feeding. Like they need a lot more of just like, this is how you do it exactly, versus if your audience is more intermediate to advanced in their skill set, they can handle a little bit more flexibility. So thinking about like, are there areas in your journey, like almost like, again, like if we're drawing them a roadmap and we're like, okay, when you go through these trees, there's going to be a bear. So just like walk really slowly for a little while. Or like, you know, there's going to be this pond and it's going to get a bit mucky. And I know you don't like it when your feet get wet, but like, trust me, like there's clean shoes for you on the other side of the bridge. Like the more that we can walk them through what this journey looks like, the more that they can just have this sense of like, okay, I know it's coming. I can do this. I like often compare it to like, if you've ever done those like kind of cheesy at-home workout videos and you're like on the floor doing push-ups and you're like, I'm just going to stop. And then right at that exact moment, the trainer's like, don't stop. Like you can do it. Like, look at your arms. You're doing so well. Like, how can you embody that kind of energy in your program to really help kind of motivate your people over the blocks? I'm also loving like all of these concepts around like, is a website ever truly done? Like, no, it's not. Am I currently redoing my website? Yes. Like it is an ongoing thing. So even that, like being able to like empathize with your people, if it's a certain spot that you know they're going to spiral, like I know my people are perfectionists. I am a perfectionist. And so being able to like help them kind of commiserate with it, like, I know you want things to be perfect, but you know, at a certain point, something being perfect and stuck in your head is not having an impact. So like, how do we move forward with this? So the more you can give your people tips and tricks and pep talks and kind of let them know what's coming, the more likely it is you can help them kind of through those blocks. So we've talked about the beginning of our journey. We've talked about the end of our journey. We've talked about blocks along the way. Before I share a few little things, and I can go over time today too. So don't worry that we're not going to run out of time for questions. I would love to hear if there's any questions about kind of the journey mapping process that we've done so far. Feeling good. Okay. So the journey mapping process that we've done, this is, like I said, the very first thing I recommend you doing for your program. Like it's where we want to start. But as we know, there is like there's so much more that comes after this. And, you know, I wish I could spend the entire afternoon, like walking you through all of the pieces, but for the sake of time and the sake of not exploding your brains in one session, I just want to kind of share with you 2 next steps that I would really love for you to do with your program. So one is kind of more on the practical standpoint when we're looking at, okay, what are my next steps? So the next step that I want you to do is to start asking yourself, what do my people need to do to move along this journey? And this is a very important distinguishing thing here. What do they need to do, not what do they need to know? I want you to keep this very action focused. So What do they need to do? And this is where we can sometimes get stuck in, the mistake of like, oh, like it's an info product, like a course isn't, like we're selling information. I need to teach them all these things. They need to know this. They need to understand this. But the fact is that results and transformation come through taking action. They don't come from just having knowledge like fire hosed at you. And often people can feel like when we're creating our programs, in order to have them be really high value, we can feel like we put pressure on ourselves to like teach more, which is why we see these things around like, my course has 5,000 hours of video and 18 pages of workbooks. And it's like, no, if you can get people a result in like short, bite-sized, like 3-minute videos and like really defined action steps, like that is so much more valuable than like just giving them all the content in the world. Yeah, I like the vomit emoji from Dustin. It's so true. It's like, it feels overwhelming for you as a creator. It feels overwhelming for your learners. Even though they might think they want it, they might be like, yeah, I'm going to take 5,000 hours of video and I'm going to be a total master. And then they show up in the welcome videos 20 minutes long and they go, I'll come back to this when I have more time. And we never see them again. So what we want to do is we want to think about, what do our people need to do to move along the journey? And that's kind of where I want you to start, is like figuring out what those action steps are. And very often as you're mapping out those action steps, organically, you're going to start to see a structure coming up for your program. Now there are more steps, and I'm always happy to answer questions about them on like future course cafes. I also have like programs that walk you through this, but this isn't going to be a whole sales pitch, so we can talk about that another time. But the other thing I want you to do for yourself is, when you are starting this process, I know that your own thought gremlins are going to come up, because we're all human and we all have a gremlin, and sometimes we give them names. I know someone who named hers Ursula after the Little Mermaid, and I thought that was so hilarious. So what I want you to think about is like, during this process, if the gremlins are kind of already speaking, already saying things, often they say things like, who are you to be teaching this? Or no one's going to buy this program, or like, you have to do this in order for it to be valuable. What I want you to do is to give yourself permission to like, let those gremlins be heard, because it's a part of you. And like, I know sometimes there's advice out there that's like, tell them to shut up and tell them to go away. But like, when was the last time someone told you to shut up and it felt good, right? Like, that doesn't feel good. So what I want you to do with your gremlins is like, the next time they're talking to you, I want you to like give them permission to like say all the stuff. And often what I do is I literally like, I write it out. I write down all the things the gremlins are saying. And then we can be like, okay, thank you. That was great. But it's not helpful. It's not going to help us move forward. So then what we can do is we can take those thoughts like, no one's going to buy this course. And then I want you to reframe it as an affirmation. And if you're not woo, that's also okay. I'm woo, so I love an affirmation, but honestly, this is like, it's proven psychology. So what you can do is you can just take it and reframe it as something positive to remind yourself of, in the sense of like, if you're telling yourself, oh, no one's going to buy this, or the gremlins are saying like, no one's going to buy this, like, who are you to teach this? So-and-so teaches it so much better. Creating something around for yourself around like, the right people are going to find me, or like, I'm pouring my heart and soul into this course and I know it's going to impact so many people. Whatever it is you need to hear to remind yourself of this process, because there's room enough for all of us. Even like, I love like on this call itself, we have like at least 3 learning designers who are all at face value offering similar things, but we do it in very different ways. And so reminding yourself that there's someone else out there who's offering what you offer, like, that's okay. Like, they're not you, and your people are going to find you and resonate with you. And if you're feeling like you're beating yourself up because like, you don't, your gremlins are telling you that you don't know enough, reminding yourself of like, what you have, like your knowledge and what you can share with your people is so powerful. And it's going to make that impact, which is why we're aiming for impact over perfection. We're aiming for impact over like analysis paralysis. So those are kind of the main things that I wanted to share with you in terms of getting started with your programs. But I would just love to hear, like, if you want to share like anything in the comments around like kind of questions you have, or anything that's resonated for you, or if you just want to raise your hand because you have something you want to ask, I'm totally happy to go for like another 15 minutes just for like general Q&A for like anything that's come up for you. And thank you for everyone saying this is great, so helpful. Thanks, Dustin. It was nice having you here. reminder for those of you who are still on here, we're having 3 more of these and they all kind of have a focus. So the one coming up on Wednesday is our tech cafe. So this is where we can talk about things like course platforms and recording videos and creating worksheets and like all the kind of tech stuff that can come up with creating a program. And then we'll have a launch cafe. And then we also have a behind the scenes cafe where I'll kind of take you behind the scenes of how I build my programs and what they look like and things that I learned the hard way so that you don't have to, all of that fun stuff. But yes, there will be a replay as well that I will send out. And Robin, you have a question. Let's hear it.
And I'm sorry that I'm talking so much, but this is so helpful. With the, like you talked about addressing those blocks, like we know that they're going to come up against internal and external blocks. How do you communicate that? Like, do you kind of have a conversation at the beginning, like a welcome call or something, laying it out and kind of preparing them for what's to come? Or do you sort of like embed it in different lessons or videos, or like what's a good way to kind of communicate that and help them move through it beyond just like treating it in a one-off, like case-by-case basis?
Yeah, for sure. So I love to do a both and, especially if like there's things that are going to feel like, okay, the majority of people are going to run into this, then I love giving them kind of a roadmap at the beginning. This is something that I saw done really well. Like, I don't know if any of you have ever saw like the books, like the Whole30, like it's like a diet lifestyle thing or something like that. But anyways, it's like a 30-day food cleanse or something. But at the beginning of the book, they actually break down the chunks of the days. And they're like, around day 7, you're going to want to murder everyone because your body's detoxing from sugar. And around day 12, you're going to feel like this, but around day 15, you're going to feel better. So I love the idea of like something like that. Obviously, we want to really make sure that we're balancing. Like, we don't want to scare our people. Like, you're going to feel horrible for the majority of this process, but just letting them know, like, here's what to expect. I mean, I'm a huge advocate in any program, making sure that you give an overview of where you're taking them and how you're getting them there, but highlighting kind of like core pieces, being like, around here, I know there's going to be a tendency to spiral. And this is where I really want you to like put a reminder in your calendar to not give up, or like call on me if you need anything, or something like that. So definitely in the beginning, and then also embedding it into the lessons itself. Thanks. Davida, you have a question.
Hi. Excuse me. Yeah, I was wondering, would you do the same thing whether I'm creating my course? Because, you know, I'm doing the course and I'm doing the community. I'm doing both. Mm-hmm. So would I do it for the community also? The same type of journey?
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely, you know, with communities, it's less of a like linear kind of transformation. And so for the community, it might be more of a intention setting, like, here's what I want people to get out of it. Here's how I want them to feel. And then asking yourself, what do they need to do? And what do you need to do to kind of hold that intention? Because with communities, it's a bit less of like, first they have to learn this, then they have to learn this. It's more like, how are they going to show up? And what threads do I need each week? And what events do I host? So it might be less of like a pathway and more of an intention. And then asking yourself like blocks that might prevent people from engaging, and actions that they can take or you can take to support that community.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Yeah, Erica.
So you were talking about the idea of like, okay, the tendency is to teach, and you just kind of want to like throw information at people on. Mm-hmm. I'm very torn about that. I'm trying to figure out, because a lot of what I teach is like, hey, this is information. This is like insider information. You don't know because you don't see it on your end, but I have experience and I see it. I see what's happening on the other side. Mm-hmm. And I'm just trying to figure out like, what is the right balance of like giving the information? How do I figure out what they need to know versus what I would like, rather what I would want them to know, or I think will be useful, and just like give them a tool instead, and like, don't bother explain it. Just here's a tool.
Yeah. Oh, such a great question. I love this. So kind of the next step in the process that we didn't have a chance to get into is like, once we're kind of mapping out those, like, what do people need to do? The next question is to ask themselves, or ask yourself, like, what do they need to know to be able to do that? So that's where we can kind of use that as a lens of discernment in terms of like what needs to be included. And so at some point in that process, we start to ask ourselves, like, what's a need to know and what's a nice to know? And whenever I'm kind of wrestling with like, you know, what do I want to include? I like to ask myself, like, how will they implement this? And like, does this piece of knowledge help them take action better? Like, you know, in the sense of like, does this piece of knowledge give them the motivation to do it? Like, this is insider information, but like, if you did this hack, you're more likely to get an interview. Like, that's super juicy. And they're like, yes, I love it. Versus if it's something that like, you know, if you want to learn more about this and like, I could talk about this, like blah, blah, blah. Like that's the type of thing where it's like, we could put that in a blog post. We can tuck that in a resource library, put it somewhere else. So kind of bringing it down to the intention of like, why am I sharing this information with them? Do they need to know it to be able to take action? Will it help them take action quicker or easier? Does it just like add personality to my course? You know, like, let me just tell you this like fun fact. Like, I don't know what it would be, but like it might be there or something like that. One thing that I do sometimes with those types of informations is I like to create little like themes for them and like have an icon where it's like, this is a fun fact, or this is like a secret hack, or this is a something. And then you can kind of have those recurring information categories like come up on screen or come up in their workbook. And it's a fun way of like adding some visual elements, but also a recurring element and they can like see again and again.
Cool. That's very cool. Thank you.
Awesome. So many good questions. Any other questions anyone has? You can pop it in the chat or you can raise your hand. Good. Okay. We have a few more minutes here. If you have anything else come up, don't be shy. But I just want to thank you all so much for coming and for participating. It was so great to see all of you and just like, thank you for engaging in the chat and asking such great questions. I would love to see you all at our next one. So that's on Wednesday. It's the Tech Cafe and it's going to be at noon again, noon Pacific. And if you can't come, don't worry. There's going to be a replay. And if there's like any specific questions you have, like you're always welcome to bring them, even if it doesn't focus around the theme of that cafe, you're always welcome to, you know, be like, hey, but I'm working on this or I have that or the other. You know me, I just love answering questions and I love hanging out with all of you. So I just want to thank you all so much. This was awesome. And if you think of anything like, oh, I forgot to ask this and I can't come to the next one, my DMs are always open on Instagram as well. If you don't follow me, you can find me at Modern Leaders Co. So Modern Leaders Co. And I'll see you all on Wednesday, hopefully. So thank you, everyone. Thanks. Bye.